morning. Good morning. This is season 8, episode 14, 321 of the Decoded podcast. Chris, good morning. Happy Saturday.
Happy Saturday. Hello. Hello. Hello.
So, do you want me to drop something on you?
Yeah, why not?
Why not? Early last week, I don't know what I was doing at work, but I had the thought that maybe sooner rather than later, I would apply to become a vice principal. Now I'm not saying I'm not taking any action. I'm not doing anything with it. I was working, I was doing something, and I'm like, you know what? Maybe it's time. Maybe
You
it's,
noticed your thinking. That's all it
yes.
was. Or it's that moment. It's that moment like when you're on driving down the high. You ever done this? You're in a public place. Could be driving down the highway, but you're in that private moment. Some sort of a private moment. You're either driving, you're on the TTC, and you sort of pop up from whatever thing that's distracting you, and you look over and someone's looking at you, and you make eye contact for a moment. And then you just kind of like you're there for a second and you kind of go back to your task. But it's like you come up out of your thinking, notice what's going on around you, go back into your thinking. I love this. How did that make you feel when you noticed that thinking?
I felt excitement. I felt I felt excitement. I felt um hey, I'm already doing something different and I'm getting smacked over the head. It's I don't make it maybe sounds negative. It probably is. I'm already getting smacked over the head. Why not just go for it? Because I think
Mhm.
my concerns was the way I'm going to get smacked around doing the job, not knowing how to do the job. Because it appears as though this is how this is done in education. They drop you in, they say, right on, thanks for coming,
Mhm.
get to work, do a great
Mhm.
thing, but you never really train properly. I don't
Mhm.
even know if there is a proper way to train you. But you know what this stems from? This stems from visiting the location of the new high school that's being built. It's going to be
Mm.
a 7 to 12 high school. And I had this thought. Here's the pre thought to the thought. Wouldn't it be cool if I applied to become a vice principal in secondary and they placed me at the new school because I have experience working in elementary and
Mhm.
now I have a little bit in secondary. It's
Yep.
just it hit me. Now, there's going to be people lined up to tell you, well, you just got to secondary, you don't know anything. And I would laugh. I will laugh and say, you don't know anything either because I'm learning every day all the time. As I
Mm.
say, getting smacked around.
I don't know if that's a thing though. I don't know if anybody. I'm gonna shake up your because I think all that was
Shake it.
was I think all that was self talk. I don't think that's system talk. I've
Which
been in
part? Which part?
this idea that that negative self talk that you just did, where you said there's going to be people lined up to basically
Oh,
tell you don't know anything. That's the negative self talk, right? I don't believe that that is true. So I'm the person on the other side of this the other side of the staff meeting that notices that you're having a thought, but no one's interrupting it. But I yell at them, go, no, kids, stop thinking that, stop it, because it isn't true. So to interrupt that thinking, no, people are not lined up. That's you talking to you. That's you talking about what you're self-shaming the experience based on what your perception of what the needs are in this space. And I've told you time and time again, your experience coming into high school is what lifts you up to a different level and apart from your colleagues. I did not like taking my primary qualification at all when I did my PQP stuff. Did not. I'm like, this is a waste of effing time. What I did enjoy was having the conversations with individuals. When I did my PQPs, there was a lot of elementaries in there. I did enjoy listening to their perspective, and all I was doing was cherry picking. I'm like, thank you, thank you, thank you. That's going to save me a lot of time by knowing that. That's really interesting. Now I need to look into that. So it gave me the bits that filled in the mortar on my secondary experience. And secondary experience is a here you go, bloop. It's just like go for it. It doesn't matter. I think education can be like that in a lot of ways. It can be a lot of ways. Just you are uh you are nothing until the first day of school, and then you are everything. You are a fully licensed, fully vested, full OCT member. Here you go. You might have been feeling a little bit nervous on Sunday, but Monday you're a teacher. Everything you do today, you can now be scrutinized for. Yesterday, not so much. Reminds me of this kid I used to work with. I forget his name. Jimmy. We'll use Jimmy. And Jimmy spent, and this is a negative version of it, but it's a bit anecdotal. You'll get it. So while Jimmy was working with me, Jimmy skipped all the time. Jimmy just didn't want to be in class. Jimmy had other interests. I'd be chasing Jimmy through the halls, not like literally, but like, yo, Jimmy, come on, let's go do some math. Yo, Jimmy, let's go do some English. It was always pleasant, right? He's like, yo, Clough, I'll be there in a second. I'm like, all right, Jimmy. Jimmy didn't get many credits. Jimmy ended up sort of like kind of falling away from school consistently. But Jimmy kept on coming back. Kept being committed back to school. I kept on talking to Jimmy like, Jimmy, you got to invest in this experience. You got to be here. You got to do this. You got to show that this is something that you want. Because right now it shows like you don't want to be at school to do all parts of school. Because I would say you don't want to be at school. He's like, yo, I do. All my friends. I'm like, no, it's got to be for the other stuff too. It has to come along with it. You have to find success in multiple modes. The day Jimmy turned 18, he was still in my class. That day, VP came in. He had skipped the morning. He was supposed to be with me the whole day. VP came in the afternoon. Said, Jimmy, come and have a conversation with me. And he shipped him off to adult school. You don't get to stay here anymore, Jimmy. In my class, the kids started to say to each other, don't let yourself get jimmied. Don't let yourself get jimmied. You have to put the work in. You have to be here. You have to be a part of this so you don't get jimmied, you don't get pulled from the game. Jimmy, I talked to Jimmy afterwards. He goes, I had a really hard time. It was like a year and a half later. I think he did a few credits at adult school. He goes, he started off by saying, I didn't think that was fair. I said, well, dude, the moment you turned 18, everything changed. You had shown that you weren't willing to invest in the whole experience of school. You know, you're causing a little bit of ruckus in the hallway. So they're like, you can't keep doing that. I often use that example when I'm talking to teachers that depending on how they're framing it, maybe they're not really taking seriously the transitional moment between that Sunday before you become a teacher and the Sunday afterwards, because you are official on that morning. All the rules apply. There is no transition. There is no get to know you. Not really. The expectations are all there. Whether or not the expectations are actually going to create a behavior in you of success or failure, you don't know yet. And those are all different kind of, they move differently. Maybe you're okay with talking to the kids, but you're not so great with the paperwork. Maybe you're great with the paperwork, but you're not so great with connecting with the parents. Maybe you're great with the parents, but you're not so good for doing assessment. Like all those little things are moving along the way. It will be no different when you step into the administrative role. You will be the teacher up to the day before. And then the next day, you are an administrator. And it won't matter the modulation that you're doing all these little pieces, you will be expected to deliver. And I will say from my observation, you'll be expected to deliver at a level that will feel entirely different than it was when you're in the classroom. And I will say from my observation, there is nothing that can prepare you effectively for that transition. I've had the conversation with my own principal, and it was a bit of a beef. I said, why is there no process to help aspiring leaders that are currently in a position of responsibility that they want to job shadow in a supportive way to see what the administrative role looks like, other than having to give up time from their pedagogical practice that actually makes them an ineffective teacher? We need to have some sort of in-house process here of being able to spend time. Now, a previous principal told me, they said, you have to spend every single one of your preps in here. Dude, ostensibly doing photocopying. And I told you I used to do the walks with Stefano. So it's that dude way back in the day when I was still considering this path that we're talking about. And that was wonderful. All I would do is text him that morning. I'm like, I got my prep done. Can I come and hang with you P2 today? He's like, yeah. He goes, and today's a good day. I have this, and this happening. It would be great for you to see it. I'm like, fantastic. He goes, some of it you can't stay for because it's actually protected. Some of the stuff you can't hear, but you can actually be a part of every single one of the things up to a point. Some of them you can stay through the whole meeting. I'm like, fantastic. And I would go and I would use my prep. We need a better process like this. It's mind boggling that we don't have something like this. One, to build better individuals that can clearly see what I am as a department, because this is the path. What I am in life is useful to me as a teacher. What I am as a teacher is useful to me as a department leader. What I am as a department leader, we dump it in order to become administrator? I would argue yes. Because then you spend the next 5 years as the administrator just trying to figure out the efficiencies and the flow of being an administrator. By that point, I would argue you've lost touch with all the really cool shit that you had your hands into as a department head. I think that's why, one of the lead questions I always like to ask when I'm meeting new principals is just, what's your teachable? It grounds you. It brings you all the way back to day one. And, to just kind of do that as I get to know you kind of conversation. And sometimes I'm mind blown, mostly by my own assumptions. Really? My brain, sometimes it blurts, "You're a math teacher?" Like, I would have never known, like, somehow how a person looks is what they teach, right? But I will say, I love that the thinking occurred to you. It's funny that you should say that because I just looked, I was in my Gmail. I looked and I saw the list of scheduled emails, and I'd done a bunch of them. And I think I have that one, but it was supposed to be this time next year. When it was like October next year, that there's that Gmail that I sent to myself to ask you on the pod, like, Chids, are you an administrator yet? Something like that. Are you in the process? So I think good for you for noticing it. Absolutely good for you for noticing it. You have the experience that would be valuable. I like that. I think that I think the idea of transition to the role previously felt too big to you because of the impact that it could have on your life. Like, just sort of like that, how do I make life work with it? I think that you switching panels chipped away at that mindset and actually in some ways kind of like lit up another sort of skill set and said, no, I can actually do this and I can still maintain my life as it is. At least it opened up, it kind of resurfaced the thinking because you have made a rather drastic transition right now, which by some measures and the conversations that came up on the pod was kind of a big deal to not only for you and your family, the way they were kind of looking at this transition for you to move over and who you will be, your identity in there. Besides the challenges, I think you've transitioned well. You're doing well in your first year of high school.
Thanks. I'm back in grade 9 again.
Yeah.
So you lit me up in a few different areas, and Rochelle has dropped some great comments that we should get to.
Yeah, for sure. Good morning, Rochelle.
And Gary's here too. Here,
Good
well,
morning,
let's do
Gary.
this.
Good
So,
morning.
Rochelle, good morning. Thanks for coming. And Gary's jumped in as well. Gary got an earful from me. We met. Gary and I had a mentor mentee type meeting last week, not
Mhm,
this week. That just happened the week before. Um, I was lit up after the conversation the three of us had after Foodapalooza. I was like, I got a lot
mhm,
to say, and I need to say it because I know something about me. It's important for me to get certain things out of my head because if I don't, it'll just eat away at me, and then it turns me. I go south, and I'm pretty good at going south, and I'm pretty good at being a real asshole when I'm there. So I'd like to, I'd like to just minimize that. And there's a lot going on with my new job, so I'm trying to learn, and I'm trying to learn, and I'm trying to ignore some of the politics because I think the politics can bring me down.
mhm.
Having said all that, you and Gary are great to listen to me and then kind of throw back stuff. But I want to say we're going to jump into what Rochelle has said, but I want to say I had my teacher performance observation the other day, and I have to tell you, of all the observations I've had with the different principals I've had them with, principals that I felt like I've had TPA observations with principals that I loved, that there was no reason for me to worry, and I've had at least one TPA observation with a principal that I was very worried to be working.
Mhm.
The one I had the other day was the most authentic experience I've had. I was truly myself. I was truly myself, and it was the only observation I've had where it was a wild card period of time, meaning there is no way I could have planned for it the way I've planned my other ones because I didn't know who was going to be in the student success room that morning. I didn't know what they were going to need from me. I knew nothing. I knew nothing. All I knew was my administrator was going to come and observe me working with the students in the room. No idea who the students were going to be. I didn't know how many kids were writing tests, who was going to pop in by mistake, how many times the phone was going to ring, whether people were going to come to the door wanting to speak to me. No idea. And yet, it was, I'm saying, like, as I reflect on it, the most comfortable, authentic observation I've ever been part of. I haven't met with my administrator yet to hear what she has to say about it,
Mhm.
but I don't know what she's going to say, but I'm telling you right now, I was doing my thing in there. I was like I was just doing my what I think my job is. I keep telling people, I've been here for 4 months, nobody's told me I'm doing it wrong. Nobody's come up to me and said, "You really need to reconsider how you're approaching this or your style with this or that." Nobody said anything, so I'm like, well, if nobody's saying anything, they're not too worried, I would imagine. Who knows? Anyway, I just wanted to drop that. I wanted to drop that because I've worked with principals who were my friends. Everything was laid out, and yet I never felt comfortable. I never felt authentic. I always felt something was amiss. Something wasn't right. Something wasn't authentic. Like I was putting on a show. I didn't feel any of that the other day. None of it. None of it. I just want to say that. Maybe we'll get to it, maybe we won't. Rochelle said that she discussed this. It's when you were talking about like a mentor model system for
The gap.
yeah, filling that gap so people can go into administration or teaching and feel like they know something, they know how to do something. She was part of a meeting on Thursday. She thinks that there really should be a revamp, um, and that it'd be beneficial as part of Teachers College for an apprenticeship to be part of that. So we want to talk about that, but then she also jumped to, we used to have a job shadow opportunity for teachers wanting to become admin. Correct me if I'm wrong, Rochelle. It was in part three of our current leadership program, and I remember participating in that. So I chose two different principals. One was a principal, one was a vice principal, and I went and I spent a day with them, um, asking questions, walking around the school. Even I appreciate that we had that opportunity. I I'm about to shit on it. One day's not enough, but I'm appreciative that I had the opportunity. I think I split it into 2 half days. So I had 4 visits with 2 different administrators that I got to choose to talk about the job, to ask my questions, to kind of see what they're doing. It was better than nothing. And yes, now we have the supply teacher shortage in our system. It doesn't seem to be everywhere. It seems to be here though, in Waterloo Region, Catholic. It has gotten in the way of a lot of experiences that I'm blessed to have been part of before everything getting cut off. That's what Rochelle said. Chris, what do you take from that?
Uh, I think we're positioned. Well, first, it just makes me think of how cool it is that we can change our minds. That's. I'll start there. Um, I think it's great that you have the flexibility to notice that you're thinking differently. Um, I think that even for myself, it's funny. I have had I have had moments where the 95% that is projected to you that says, yeah, like this admin is not my path, it does pop up in the back of my head when I look at other opportunities that I can see trending away from me. So when I think I've told you this, and I've told my kids too, like I want to get out of the community classroom. I love the work. See, and this is the thing that's kind of difficult to explain, or some people have a hard time kind of taking in. Um, I love the work that I do. I wholly, my whole body think that I am working in education, and that is a really big space to me. So the moment that I start to feel like I'm just being confined to one space, my brain wonders. It's the exact moment from 20 years ago when I started to use Twitter and I'm in the middle of a conversation. I wonder, how does this conversation look somewhere else? And I start having conversations about in real time. I start back channeling about stuff that's we're talking about in our staff meeting. It actually started with emails. I started sending emails to friends because I knew they were having a staff meeting that day too. And I'm like, yo, what is your admin saying about this particular thing? Because I'm not really understanding this. And they're giving me message back saying, yeah, that's not how it's being explained here. And instantly I was put into this kaleidoscopic mode of there's different ways to look at the same job and the same information. And I've carried that as a driving force in my operating system in education. Um, So me being opportunistic and thinking about what else can I do within education is one part, get the qualification so opportunity can actually meet me where I'm at. But the other part too is um, I like getting to know myself in these roles. Just like what I was explaining to you about running. Like I don't know myself at a 10K mark. I don't know myself at like these feel like destination points, but also sort of like reflective points. Do I like this version of me? Would I like to get to know this version of me a little bit more? Okay, let's run more 10 kilometers. Or now, you know what? I want to meet the version of me at 15 kilometers. Oh, you don't want to meet that guy. No, I think I want to meet that guy. Let's see if I can meet that guy. So this journey that I'm having through education, whenever someone sort of suggests, I'm a constant gap analyzer. So looking at where the expectations or the goals seem to be really clearly pinpointed, but there's absolutely no path to it other than through the suffering and cost and sometimes regret of the individuals that are trying to get there. So when I started to look at this as a continuum of leadership within a school, and they tell us that we are all leaders, I started to think, but you say that, but there isn't actually a bridge to that place, and you can't get there on your own, or can you? And then this is why I did the Stefano thing. I'm like, hey, can I just come and hang with you? This is not a stable process, and nobody else is doing it, which is what I'm thinking in my mind. But buddy, can I just text you? Can I text you that morning and say, I've got all my prep done, which is my reality. I have to be good in my job, which is teaching. But if I get that extra time, can I text you in the morning and say, can I come and hang with you for your meetings today? And you find a person that says yes. Now, I know to formalize that means that it becomes shitty because it was awesome. Because it got to the point where I would text him. He's like, yeah, I'm just heading out to grab a couple coffees. Would you like one? I'm like, this is good. This is the growth. This is the warmth. This is the path that makes you feel like there's space for me in this leadership model. Because you think to yourself, I would do the same thing for some young teacher that wanted to learn about leadership. I'd probably grab a coffee too. We remove that ceiling and say, this is a continuum. I'm going to buy you a coffee. I'm going to welcome you. I'm going to include you in my day. And you start to think, man, there is a way to sort of think of this continuum. So all this to say, you telling me this is of no surprise. I think what will be surprising to me is how you navigate these next steps, only because I don't know you in this mode. You had a lot of these calls even before I met you. And when you explained it after the fact, your reasoning for getting to that chair, I don't know if it's still the same, but if memory serves, the reason that you wanted to get that chair was a fairly, like there was a self-worth element to it, is that if I get there, I've got the bragging rights. That's my memory of that. There was an element of that I can do this. There was attached to it. So I'll be curious. I'm so curious to watch as you move through this next step to see what parts of your identity you say to yourself, that's what's useful to move forward. This isn't useful to move forward. and I'm along for the ride. However it looks, it's great.
Thumb up. Um, I I love that idea of texting Stefano, you said his name was, and being like, "Prep's done. I'm good to go if we can
Isn't
do
that
it."
where we are? Like, really, as teachers, isn't that just the reality of your morning? You think you're good. And I will say the reality of my morning in a community classroom, because I could have my prep done and then, like, oh, I got an escalation. So if I had actually scheduled that with Stefano, as if he's making time for me, then that means his time might have been thrown out. Now I'm sure he would have used it for something, but just the ability to kind of do the bat phone version of it makes sense to me. It feels very human. It feels so real. I'm not going to put it in an Outlook calendar thing. You can, but really, I don't know. It feels
Sometimes
like a good relationship.
sometimes I like the Outlook calendar
Hmm.
because then I can I can put it can live somewhere in my world, but I also see that it's really cool to see how administration operates in a high school. There's so much learning. It's like well, like I said, I've been there 4 months and I've been in a bunch of different meetings with different administrators for different reasons and observed the administrator operate in a confident mode, meaning they've done this before, they know how to process something, and in a mode where they don't know. And they're telling me, like, one meeting, I said to the administrator, I'm like, listen, I have no idea what I'm doing here. And he said, neither do I. We'll
Mm,
get it done together. And I
mm,
actually felt good. I'm like, okay, so you know that I don't know, and I know you don't know, and you're not trying to hide it. You're like, no, no, we'll figure this out, and I will support you because my role is to do that. And I'm like, I'm in. I mean, whether I wanted to be in or not, it's a whole other story. But I was like, okay, rather than no, Roland, you need to get this done. I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. They're like, well, you'll figure it out. And they don't say anything about supporting me. Because that's the other thing, too. It's like I'm watching them because every time they act or say something, I'm flipping through my 24-year
yeah.
book in my mind saying,
Yeah.
I don't care how long you've been an administrator. I've been doing this job long enough that I've got a schema that's pretty damn thick, and I know when you're full of shit, or at least when I can feel that, or when I feel you're being authentic. And I'm like, I like this authenticity. I can learn from you. I can learn with you. I can do this. Rather than, I'm not doing that for you. Why are we cutting corners here? What are you not doing? Like, this is what's happening. And I got to tell you, right now, with the four administrators in my building, I'm like, this is good. Like, it feels good to me. Now, does that mean it's good? I don't know. Because feeling good all the time we know that's not the way the world works. But I will tell you, from an educator's perspective, there's a lot going on in a high school, more so than in elementary school. And I'm exposed to it and I really like it. I really like
Mm,
being exposed to the different things. What I don't like is not having enough time in the day to do everything. But that's why I like Outlook. No, I can't be with you at that time because I'm going to be with that person at that time. It's carved in and I'm not uncarving it. So figure it out. The other day, someone came to me and said, on this day, can you do this? And I said, I can't tell you that I can. And the look on their face was like, you always say you're going to take care of things. I said, I have an observation and then I'm going to operate. I'm going to operate in the way that that administrator wants me to operate. So if they say I need you to come see me today at this time to talk about your observation, then that means everything that was supposed to happen during that time isn't going to happen. So I can't tell you I'm going to do that today because I don't know if I'm going to have time. If like I want to, but I can't tell you, yeah, I'm going to make it happen today. I don't want to do that because my observation is trumping everything today. I felt comfortable saying that. I don't say that often. But I was like, no, I don't know if I can get to that today. Because there's a lot of, can you get to this today? And I'm like, I can only get to a certain number of things today because time is finite. The end of the day will come. Students will leave. Nobody's going to wait 20 minutes after school to meet with me because I said I need to talk to them about something. Like, that's just not the reality. I don't want it to be. You get what I'm saying? So
mhm.
even with the 10, you need to do this today, I have to prioritize. I can't do everything.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, um, Rochelle says that it was part of her third part, but she couldn't do it. So she had to use her planning time.
Mm-hmm.
God bless you. I mean, that if that doesn't show an interest, because lots of people say, I'm not doing it then if I have to do it on my time, which is fair. But then you have people like Rochelle who's like, no, no, I want to make this happen. I will make it happen.
Yeah, I think I would always be cautious about the interest. And it's not that I'm saying Rochelle wasn't interested, but I'm always cautious about interest because at the same time, you know, there are individuals that are looking to ascend through leadership, and it's not necessarily because of interest. Their motivation isn't so uh,
Pure,
useful,
useful.
benevolent, right? I mean, they like I've seen people absolutely desperate to move up the leadership ladder just so that they're making extra cash. And that's part of it. We can't ignore that individuals they look at it like, one of the phrases is, when you retire is you want to have the best 5 years of your life to be high paid at a certain level, right? So when you retire, your retirement cash is higher. So I guess part of it is that the showing of the interest I get, and I get why you would say that. I'm always cautious about starting there, and it's not that I'm avoiding the positive. I just think that as if we're basing if we're basing up here's my problem with it. If we're basing the construction of a framework on interest, then we may not really be paying attention to the actual uh system that's flawed, because then what we could say, if people are so someone giving, and this is the loop that I got caught in, because I wasn't prepared to give up my prep all the time as per that one principle, thus I was not interested in the role. Does that make sense? Like when I first talked to the principal at the same school, I talked about, okay, so I'm kind of starting to think about this. So this is you and me talking 9 years ago. I said, I'm kind of interested in this, but like exploring the possibility of becoming an administrator. And there was a lot of rigmarole for me because of the way I came into education, which was through the tech vein. So, when you apply to even get into the PQP1, they're looking for you to have whatever, a master's and a specialist. Like you have to have these two kind of pieces, right? And I forget the criteria. But they allowed me to come in with two specialists that I had gotten, plus I had the designation within hospitality. And they said, well, you kind of have three, you don't have a master's, whatever. So I qualified to get in. So after I got up to that bump, I'm like, cool. I went back to the principal. I said, okay, I'm in PQP1. And this was just pre-COVID, like 2019, 2018, something like that. And she said, okay, so you want to make sure that you're coming down here every prep to come into the office and support the office. And I thought, as soon as she said, I'm like, no, really? I'm like, no, I can't. I started to right away think about my current portfolio and I couldn't make it work. So I was interested, but the measure of interest was not the criteria I was using, was not the criteria that this potential mentor was using. So I think we have to be cautious about using interest as it. I think, yeah, I think interest is not a reliable metric for offering or changing or adjusting how we do things systemically. I know it is one of them because often we'll say interest begets sort of money begets kind of like capacity, like all these all these kind of volume metrics. But that's all they are, is volume metrics. They're not density metrics. I would rather have density metrics where we're thinking about how interested are you and in what way are you interested? And you are interested, what do you think could be your application of this leadership frame? Because I right away thought to myself, if you're already telling me what the job is that I am bound to this office, I'm like, that doesn't feel right to me. And I think that was part of my tip. I think it was an early warning system that kind of went off. So I made it through the PQP1, and then I was in those conversations. I got to the PQP2 during COVID online. I'm like, I don't like the way we're talking about leadership here, but everybody is saying it, so it must be true. right? All the students in my class are all talking the exact same way. And I'm like, what is this? Is weird. And that was my fallout with it. That was like, yeah, it's not you, it's me. I gotta go.
Um,
I will say the one thing too, but it has popped back up in my mind. I thought it's kind of like, it's like cigarettes. It's like, you every once in a while, I walk past someone that's having a smoke and I wonder, what would it be like to have a cigarette again? So even you saying this right now, I've already had moments in the last couple of years that despite I'm saying, I'm like, do I really still believe that? The flexibility, which is where I started with this. I love that you have this flexibility of self analysis and reflection.
so I appreciate what you were saying about interest. I totally appreciate what you're saying about interest, and I can make a connection to it as well. Where once I had more of an interest, and have I ever told you the story about cleaning the art supply room? Ever tell you that story?
Mm,
Does it sound
not
familiar?
not sure.
Many years ago, when I was in elementary, mid-career, I would say, and I was very interested in leadership. And so, in an elementary school, they used to call it shoot, what they call it. Basically, when the principal was away, you would you would you
We
jump.
call it we call it designate.
Yes, yeah, sorry,
Designate. Yeah.
principal designate. There's been a few names over the years of it. Anyway, this one principal I was working under, I believe she was a true tyrant, and I knew that at the time. But I was still interested in building my designate of authority, is what we call it now. Rochelle's
Mhm.
reminding me. Thanks, Rochelle. And every time this principal was away for a full day, I would get a supply teacher for my role so I could be in the office all day and I basically do whatever was required. But every time this principal was away, one of the things she wanted me to do was clean the art supply room. And it was every time. And I remember once saying to her, "Have you looked at the art supply room? Like, I've been in there like 10 times in half a year. Like, do you ever come back to school and look in the room and wonder, like, you never tell me what isn't clean or what's not put away properly. So when I go in there, I just make sure it's orderly and everything's where it's supposed to be. So I don't know what it is that you're referring to that needs to be cleaned up every single time." And I've spoken to people about this, and I remember them saying, "She's just giving you the gears, so just be quiet and do it." And I'm like, "No, I didn't sign up to be principal designate to clean the art supply room." And if this is one of those medical school moments where you need to work for 48 straight hours to prove that you're going to be a good doctor. So you
That you're worthy.
whatever you want to call it, yeah,
Yeah.
like, is it a rite of passage that's worth my time? And I was like, this is stupid. Why am I, like, to me, I was like, maybe once or twice, if you have time, Roland, and the school's not on fire, can you just go in there and kind of straighten things out? Because we keep asking staff to do it, and for whatever reason, they don't or can't get to it. So can you deal with that today? But it was like at the top of her list every time. And I'm like, what's your problem? But then I have people in my life who tell me that I'm the one with the problem because I'm not just doing it, it's just part of the process. And I'm like, certainly I believe I have skills and other things that I could be doing that are more important than cleaning the art supply room. But
Mhm.
anyway, I just wanted to put that out there because there are some really stupid things that we try to get people to do as a, "Oh, you want to do that? Well, you're going to have to deal with some garbage first to demonstrate your commitment." And what did you say, Chris? Uh,
Worth.
your worth. Are you worthy of being one of us? And it's like, I got something to say about that now that I can't say on the podcast because it's completely inappropriate, but I'm sure you can put together, and so can Gary and Rochelle, what I would like to respond with right now on the podcast that I won't. But that's where I'm at now. So if I walk into my VP's office on Monday and say, "You know what? I think I want to become an administrator," and then they start giving me Joe jobs and art supply room cleanup, then I'm like, yeah, this isn't going to work. I'm not here to do that. I'm here to serve, and I'm going to watch how you model the job. But I don't see you in the art supply room cleaning it 24/7 all the time every day. But that's what I'm going to do. Okay. There's the okay. So anyway, I had an interest, but I wasn't interested in cleaning the art supply room every time. So the next year, I was like, yeah, somebody else can do this. I've been there, I've done that. And then, somebody else stepped up who was more than happy to be in the art supply room for a quarter of the day every time that principal was away. And they didn't complain, and they just went and did it. I'm like, hey, show your worth, I guess, if that means something to that person. I've got stories about that person. That person was just horrible. My opinion, just horrible. And I have stories to prove how horrible she was to different people who thought that they were worthy, who thought that she had given them a stamp of approval, but she never really did. She just pretended like she did, but when it counted, she did not step up for those people. And they came back to me in the end and said, "Man, you were right." And my response to them was, "I'm sorry. I'm sorry that this happened to you. I told you what happened to me. I told you to be careful, and you got burned like I got burned. Sorry. I wish I wasn't right." But I've
Hmm.
had people, yeah, I'll tell you some stories someday, but um, I want to know. Rochelle said that she was asked yesterday if she was going to jump into the VP pool. Rochelle, was it? No, Chris,
You know, yeah.
Rochelle, was it a drive-by? Hey, you'd be great in it, or are you going to do it, or not even? Just are you going to do it? I want to know, and I think by Chris's reaction,
You know it right away.
I would love, because people
What did the
say that.
recruitment moment look like?
Yes,
Yeah, that's it. What did the recruitment? Yeah.
because I'll tell you something, Rochelle. I think, and Gary will appreciate this too. Um, People ask, people say things, but it's never the people who are in the role to help choose whether you're coming into this or not. Those people don't never say they never said anything. Well, that's not true. When I was a re-engagement teacher, a couple of people in positions of higher authority did say to me, "Have you considered this? I think you'd be great in the role. So, what's stopping you? Let's talk about it." And I was very appreciative of those moments, um, because I felt like somebody who has a say sees something, and I appreciate that. Because normally, for me, 97, 98% of the time, it's people who have no say, who are like, "You'd be great." And they're just doing it for whatever reason. So she was just asked. Just asked. That's it. They never told you you'd be good at it, Rochelle? Did they say any of that?
I will say if I yeah, so we're getting close to doctor's questions here, I would say in my own classroom, and my kids are familiar with this. I will say this is a good moment maybe to remind, and maybe Gary wants to be a part of this too. Uh Rochelle, this is also something that we can take to the WhatsApp. We can talk about this away from here, just to because I do have questions, but I have questions, but I would rather pose them more directly to you in there. And it's out of curiosity. I am curious about this. Um, Shids and I have talked about this at length about what the recruitment process looks like. We've talked about at length that sitting there being asked that question can be a stunner. The moment that it's asked in can make it sort of confusing. It can be an identity question, as in you never thought about that yourself. It can be a identity question about the individual asking you, because it can sometimes be the person asking you. Um, Maybe they're not a reliable individual in your world. So, how do you sort of take in that moment and make it feel authentic for you? And that was a challenge for me when I started to parse it out for myself, is like to make it feel like an honest and um, an honest assessment. I had to do a lot of work to do an honest assessment of where I am in my pedagogy as a teacher to be able to make space for the suggestion that I could possibly be something more. So it wasn't as much of a worth, it was actually more practical, as in, okay, I wasn't thinking in that direction. Can I actually make time to start thinking about myself in that way? and then the complications that can come with that, because of course there's courses and there's alignment, there's different things you have to do after that fact. So yeah, I would love to kind of chat that one out a little bit more off pod online somewhere else.
Thanks for a great conversation this morning, Chris, Gary, and Rochelle.
I have to go to Tai Chi.
You got to go to Tai Chi. I got to drive my kid to work.
Mm-hmm.
Dadding is happening. Dadding, living, lifing, whatever you want.
Living, baby, living. We don't have to make up an extra word. This is living, and I'm enjoying it, man. I'm enjoying it.
Awesome. Any final word before we go?
I want to, next week, we'll get back to my HUD picture that I shared on Instagram. I'll put it in a polo to you just to give it some shape, but I want to get back to that. I also reached out to Zoe Brannigan Pipe because I wanted to get her perspective. She is a universal design person that I want to talk to. I want to talk to her about how do we get kids that have some complications or challenges with social awareness, reading the room. How do we help support them move through the space? I tapped you about the empathy engine, so you know where I'm going with this. And it just felt like a bit of an aha moment when I used the video game heads-up display and the evolution of that, because I am, like you, an old school gamer. Remember when there wasn't as much information on the screen? You had the score and maybe your health. That was it. There's a whole lot more information on the screen now. So I use that analogy with a student to help them kind of understand how to read the room, how to focus on your learning. And I felt like I tapped into something there, like a bridge between two different understandings, and the kid was starting to kind of get it. So yeah, I want to play with that over the course of the next week. And the picture is there on my socials if anybody wants to check it out.
Okay, cool. Yes, we need to come back to the HUD display, and maybe between now and then, you will have connected with Zoe.
Mm-hmm. I'm hoping.
Fingers crossed, bro.
Both of them.
Okay.
And toes.
Gotcha. Okay, this was season 8, episode 14, number 321 of the Decoded Podcast. Thanks, everybody, for checking it out, for jumping in, and we'll catch you later. Have a great weekend and week. Peace.
Peace, man.